30 years later, it's an event most remembered by the lasting images it produced. Tiananmen Square, packed for weeks with demonstrators calling for a more democratic government. And on surrounding streets, the subsequent chaos and violence. The fires, the tanks, the gunshots, hundreds if not thousands were killed as the government sent in troops to shut down the protests. An official death toll was never released. For those who were there on June 4th, 1989, the memories remain fresh. Every now and then, these three get together in Beijing. They all protested in Tiananmen and spent about 15 years in prison because of it. It's come to define the remainder of their lives, and yet...
Average people in China only have a very basic awareness of what happened in it.
China wants you and the rest of the world to forget that anything bad happened here, to erase the protests and the violence from the history books. School children are not taught about it. It's not mentioned in their textbooks. There are no memorials to remember those who died. On Chinese internet, anything about the pro-democracy protests is censored. For all the witnesses, all the horrific pictures, China's government pretends a seminal event of the 20th century didn't exist. China's defense minister recently defended the military's response in 1989, saying the protests were a political turmoil that needed to be quelled, and the military response was the correct policy.
Once they mention it, it's very possible that the legitimacy of their regime will be threatened.
Fang Zheng protested in the square and spoke to us in Taiwan. He lost his legs after being run over by a tank. He says China's ruling Communist Party wants to stay in power more than anything else, and talking about what happened could undermine the Chinese public's confidence in party leaders. Erasing a government atrocity from history is in its interest.
And in recent years, under the rule of President Xi Jinping, the political situation has become harsher.
Fang and other critics say not talking about what happened in Tiananmen is right in line with the increased repression in China recently, things we've reported on. Hundreds of human rights lawyers arrested, extrajudicial imprisonment of dissidents, increased censorship of the media and the internet, the mass detention of ethnic Muslim minorities. China denies all of that, but they are all things designed to exert control and quash dissent, done by a government, critics say, whose biggest fear is a repeat of what happened in 1989. Many in the West thought China would democratize after what happened in Tiananmen Square. It didn't. Perhaps the most well-known scene from the events of 30 years ago is this. A man, alone, standing in front of a column of military tanks, trying to stop their advance. He's paid homage right now at this exhibit in Taiwan. We filmed it last week, and as we did so, a Chinese tourist came up to us and asked, "Who is that?" Matt Rivers, CNN, Beijing.